as Todd Morgan said, it isn't an issue of availability, but it's a question of accessibility. When we look at what wood biomass products are available or resources are available in Montana. And that we do have a lot of forested lands, and a good portion of it does belong to the U.S. Forest Service. We've talked about them, and I think this panel will talk about the Forest Service lands more. We have state forests, obviously, which, as I'd said earlier, is about 800,000 acres. But in the northern region, the Forest Service has over 20 million acres. So they are the big player in the room, and we obviously have a lot of acres of private forest lands within Montana, particularly western Montana, who are players in this as well. And there are a lot of unique challenges here in trying to tease out the question of availability and what is accessible to use as biomass. And I think Todd did a great job discussing that this morning, and Bob Harrington discussed that as well. And one of the keys to this is really collaboration, is folks sitting down and working together and trying to figure out how we can gain access to these important resources. And so we have this afternoon folks that have not only been working together and with each other, but with other diverse groups to try and tease out this puzzle of accessibility. And so first we have Marnie Criley, and Marnie's going to talk to you. She comes to us as the new director of Restore Montana, which looks at using the restoration principles at restoring not only forest lands, but other lands in Montana, but she's going to focus particularly today on forest lands. She'd worked previously with Wildlands CPR, and Marnie has a long, rich history with collaborative efforts, and that's really the key here today, is how we focus on collaboration, not controversy. Because controversy hasn't gotten us very far, but collaboration maybe isn't quite as sexy and doesn't hit the newspapers as much, but it's that collaboration which will really find the solutions to these questions. So Marnie?
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I am here today to talk about an effort called the Montana Forest Restoration Committee. And I think I want to start, I don't usually like to read stuff when I'm standing in front of folks, but I think I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs from a document that this effort put out, just to give you a little bit of the background of this effort, and then I'm going to talk more specifically about how this effort is being successful on the ground. And actually, these words were written by Brian Kahn with Artemis Common Ground, who some of you probably know. Differences of opinion about national forest stewardship and the winner-take-all structures have led to decades of polarization among our citizenry and near paralysis on the ground. Over time, responsible people on many sides of forest issues concluded the present system was failing our timber workers and timber-dependent communities, failing the ecological health of our forests, failing our responsibility to future generations. That left a question. Despite our differences, could key parties come to the table to see if there was a zone of agreement we share, a common ground set of ideas we could build on to generate positive work on the ground? In August 2006, Artemis Common Ground invited 9 people from industry, the conservation community, U.S. Forest Service, state of Montana, and the nonprofit sector to explore that question. After an all-day meeting, everyone concluded that common ground might be created around the idea of on-the-ground restoration, work to restore the health of our national forests. In January of 2007, 34 representatives of conservationists, motorized users, outfitters, loggers, mill operators, state government, and the Forest Service held its first meeting at Lubrecht Experimental Forest, facilitated by the National Forest Foundation. All present agreed the restoration goal was worth pursuing. They agreed to work by consensus, meaning that everyone had to agree before a proposal was accepted. They set August 1st as the deadline to finish their work, and they all personally committed to help get the job done. So at that meeting in January, we decided as a group of 34 very diverse folks, I mean, that first meeting was pretty tense, but we decided that this idea of putting together a set of restoration principles that these folks could agree to, and work with their constituencies to hopefully agree to as well. It was worth the effort. And we actually did finish those principles in 6 months. And the result of that effort is this document here. And I put a few copies of this outside on the main table, and you can also read this on montanarestoration.org. We ended up with 13 restoration principles. But that was just kind of the first piece of our work. And while there was a group working on those principles, there was another group of folks working on, okay, once we do the principles, you know, we can't have them sitting on a shelf. We need to figure out how we're going to implement these principles on the ground. And I had actually been engaged in an effort previously where a group of conservationists from across the country drafted a set of principles, but we never really figured out what we were going to do with them afterwards. And truthfully, those have kind of sat on a shelf. So, you know, that was, I think, certainly a stipulation of mine, as well as probably everyone in that room, is that we need to make these work on the ground in Montana. So the result of that is that we now have restoration committees on the Lolo National Forest, the Bitterroot National Forest, and the Lincoln District of the Helena National Forest that are taking these principles and implementing them on projects on the ground to, you know, try to get past the appeals, the litigation, to get these projects hitting the ground with consensus agreement that these are restoration projects, they're good for the land, but that ideally they're also going to provide goods and services for Montanans, and they're going to employ Montanans to do good restoration work on the ground. And one project, it's going to be probably our first project to hit the ground. So the Lolo Restoration Committee has kind of gotten out of the gate the quickest on projects. And we are currently working on 3 to 4 different projects right now. And our first one is on Tim Love's district in Seeley Lake. It's called Augie Fuels and Restoration. And it's going to be hopefully hitting the ground this year. So we're very excited about that. And I was just talking to Tim about it, and they got no negative comments on this project. It was all positive support. So, in fact, they were kind of like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So that's what we hope to see on a lot of these projects, is that there's broad support for them, they're good for the ground, they're good for Montanans, and they are providing some goods and services for Montana businesses. So I want to kind of keep it short and allow a lot of time for questions and answers, but I do just want to mention that a lot of folks engaged in the Montana Forest Restoration Committee are in this room. So, you know, if folks have questions about the effort, there's a bunch of us you can talk to, including Gordy Sanders, who is one of the initial members. So thank you very much.
I told the folks we were going to be quick because we know there are going to be questions at the end, and at this time of day I think fast is better than slow as far as presentations. So our next one is going to be Lan Tawney, and Lan is a UM graduate. Yay, Grizz, go Grizz. And he'd worked with the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. He's worked with the Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, which has been very successful, very bipartisan. Again, the emphasis here is in bipartisanship, collaboration, working together, avoiding polarization. And he's now part of the Sportsman Leadership Committee, which is part of the National Wildlife Federation. And they have been a partner, the Wildlife Federation has been a partner in many of these collaborative efforts, and Lan's going to talk to you about some of their continuing efforts.
Thanks, Mary. Go Grizz, right? We're in Grizz country. Okay, again, my name is Lan Tawney. I'm a 5th-generation Montanan. I've grown up around the timber industry. I live up Patty Canyon, just out of town here. My grandfather has 120 acres of a tree farm. My aunt and uncle live up the way, have a 40 acres tree farm. Not big stuff, but I've been cutting trees and burning slash for my entire life. And came to the Federation 4.5 years ago. One of the things that attracted me to the Federation is they're on the ground kind of working with different folks. And collaboration is what we're going to talk all about today. And finding common ground. I think, you know, when you look at some of the timber harvest that was happening in the past, I remember flying from Missoula over to Moses Lake with my father in a small 1-engine plane and going to the top of Idaho and seeing some of the way those clear cuts were happening all the way down to these high mountain lakes. And, you know, as a kid who was 12 years old, at that point, I knew that that wasn't right, and I wasn't old enough to know exactly what that meant. But I did get a wildlife biology degree and found out that there was good ways to harvest timber and there was bad ways. And I think the more and more that we're doing today is the good ways. So some of the collaborative things that we've been doing at the National Wildlife Federation, two of which just happened through the Omnibus Public Lands Bill. And those two examples that I'm going to tell you about didn't have to do with timber harvest, but it did have to do with working with diverse partners. And the first one will be the Wahi Wilderness in Idaho. The Wahi Wilderness was a proposal that was actually brought forward by Senator Crapo, so there was bipartisan support there. But really it was the ranching community and the conservation community coming together and looking at that area and saying we want to continue to have ranching, but we also would like some wilderness. And so basically the wilderness protect those kind of backcountry values, and then the ranching protects the values that we have in Idaho. So actually that got passed about a month ago. Another piece of that was down the Wyoming Range. Wyoming Range in Wyoming is this gorgeous piece of mountains. Provides great mule deer habitat, some of the most best mule deer habitat in the world, as well as a great moose habitat. Right on the edge of that is a bunch of oil and gas development. And so the worry was that this encroachment was going to come into that area and reduce some of the values that we had there. And so what we did was we worked with, it was a long process, but worked on the ground with oil and gas companies to talk about what they needed, and then kind of worked with the conservation side of folks to say what they needed. And through that came the Wyoming Range, and now we have protection and some assurity for those oil and gas companies. So that brings me to kind of what I'm going to talk about today. And I've been involved in this process kind of peripherally, but always working kind of in conjunction with my colleague Tom France, who could not make it today, and he was very sorry. What that is the Beaverhead Deer Lodge Partnership. Beaverhead Deer Lodge Partnership started out back in 2005 when the Forest Service was going through their forest plan revision. And what they were coming up with some of their drafts was not really agreeable to the conservation side, at least National Wildlife Federation, Trout Unlimited, and Montana Wilderness Association. And also the timber companies that were looking at that, they weren't getting the kind of cut that they wanted out of that plan. And so it was always fun for me to be in the room with these guys when they first started talking, because they've been fighting a lot beforehand. And now they had some common ground that they could actually talk about on a forest-wide level. And when they looked at kind of the four components really of what they needed was, one, some timber harvest. Second thing was restoration. Restoration was not only for fish habitat because of all the erosion, because of a lot of the roads that were on the forest, but also for taking some of those roads out to reduce the density of roads. I'm a big elk hunter. The Beaverhead Deer Lodge provides 40% of the elk that are taken in Montana every year. And so there's great resources there, and they could be even better if we reduce some of those roads, the density of roads, I guess. And then the third one really was the wilderness component. And there's some special places in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge. Pat Williams tried to get those protected, and did not happen. And so these are all these places that we've been looking at to try to protect clean water and places of solitude to hunt and fish. And so we looked at those areas. Every single year they were being encroached upon by snowmobiles and off-road vehicle use, and so there was less and less of that area that was available actually for true wilderness. So those are the real principles that came out. And the partnership has been working back and forth. They had quite a few meetings. And then in 2006, they really came up with a partnership strategy. And this was about those principles, about what they needed, but they really started getting into brass tacks. And kind of where those are, and these guys can fill in if I miss anything, but really when you talk about the timber cut part of this, is the timber harvest, there was going to be mechanical treatment on 7,000 acres a year. It doesn't mean that means 7,000 acres of timber being cut, the entire thing, but it means 7,000 acres of mechanical. From there, those will all be stewardship contracts, which is very important because stewardship contracting actually keeps the money on the forest. What was happening traditionally, and was part of the reason we didn't like the plan that the Forest Service had come up with, was because all those receipts were going to go out to Washington, D.C. And it's up to the forest to ask for that money back to do restoration projects. Now, I've done a lot of work out in D.C. and a lot of great things happen in D.C., but when you ship money out there, it's really hard to get it back. And so the idea of this process, the stewardship contract, is actually keeps it on the forest so they can actually do restoration. So the first part was actually getting that timber harvest done. Using those receipts then was doing restoration. Restoration, really, we talked about it. One of them was reducing erosion. Well, one of the ways you do that is you roll up roads, make them back to the contour of the way the mountain was, and so it reduces the erosion. But another way is a real simple one, and that's putting in culverts. actual culverts that when they go underneath the road, they're not picking up a bunch of dirt and taking them downstream. And so we keep that water cool and clean for the bull trout and cutthroat trout that call the Beaverhead Deer Lodge home. And then the other part of that restoration, which I already alluded to, but it really means something to elk, was in some places in this forest there was 3.5 to 4 miles, linear miles, per square mile of roads. Now for elk and security reasons, they like things at about a mile, but they can live with stuff at about 2 miles. And so really the goal in this partnership was to bring it down to 2 miles. And so there'll be places where we'll be rolling up pieces of road to make sure that the elk have that security. Last piece was the wilderness piece. And again, this wilderness is, they've been trying to do this for a long time, and this is actually about 570,000 acres of new wilderness in Montana. And that's a very significant piece of wilderness, and it's very significant, I think, one, that this diverse group of partners has come together and agreed that this is going to go forward. But I think the wilderness piece, for me, and having timber companies and mills support wilderness is a very big deal. And that's part of the partnership that it was, is that I don't think everybody's getting everything that they want, but it's definitely a collaboration and people are working together. So where's that process now? Continue to have meetings with the partnership, and then from there, they've kind of branched out to getting that out to folks on the ground. I'm talking to county commissioners, talking to local Trout Unlimited groups, local rod and gun clubs, and then really getting that out to the rank and file logging community. Where we are now is Senator Tester is very interested in this proposal. He's taking a hard look at it, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I'm pretty confident that we have a plan in place that is actually real and working on the ground that actually can go forward. So that's my short piece today, but thank you.
Thank you, Land. And as he's talking about the Beaverhead Deer Lodge effort, we're going to hear another part of the story, but this time from industry. And I want to mention before Sherm Anderson comes up here that down in that area, the Beaverhead Deer Lodge, there's a lot of state forested land as well as other private lands, and it's one of the worst bug kill lodgepole stands in the state. So it has really tremendous potential, and it also has tremendous challenges because of the forest health issues that are down there. And any kind of a collaborative, there are folks on both sides of the aisle that maybe don't want to agree. I know some of the county commissioners down there haven't been real happy, and there are some conservation groups that are not very happy with Beaverhead Deer Lodge Collaborative. So when you try to work together, that doesn't mean everybody's going to come to the table and that everyone's going to agree. But to get this core group of folks, conservation folks and industry folks, as well as others, to the table and talking over this long period of time really has been a tremendous effort. And Sherm Anderson has been important, a significant part of it. Sherm is the owner of Sun Mountain Lumber. He also was in the technical committee to put together the best management practices for forest timber harvest practices in Montana. And he was a senator in the Montana legislature, so he has a long history of reaching across the aisle and trying to figure out how to make things work on the ground in a pragmatic way. So Sherm Anderson, owner of Sun Mountain Lumber, is next.
Thank you, thank you, Mary. I don't know whether you noticed, but as Lance was making his presentation, he kept glancing over there. You know, they still don't trust us when we're sitting behind him. You know, he never knows what's coming. So hopefully, we're going to bridge that trust gap one of these days. But as Mary said, I'm the owner of Sun Mountain Lumber in Deer Lodge, and it's a family-owned and operated facility. And when I say family, I mean family. There's myself and my 2 sons, my daughter, my son-in-law, my daughter-in-laws, and we all work in the business as well as my wife. And so for us, it's important, the future. And, you know, we're here to stay and provide jobs for our family as well as all the people who depend on us. And I'm fortunate at Sun Mountain that I started out as a logger in the logging business, and That's probably another reason why Lance doesn't trust me. When he flew over, he didn't look down and notice that it was me down there by the lake, you know, waving at him. But hopefully those days are gone. But at any rate, we've heard a lot of interesting conversations today. And in a brief review, we've talked about climate change and warming, obviously, and the frequency and intensity of wildfires that we all have to deal with. And the forest conditions being overstocked and bug infested, and the dead and dying trees that we see everywhere. And unfortunately, we down in Deer Lodge live right in the middle of that. That's where the beetle infestation began, was on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge. So unfortunately, we have to deal with that directly. We talked about many different technologies that are ongoing and constantly being developed. And biomass, biofuel, bioenergy, bio this, bio that, you know, a little bit of everything. But from an industry perspective, what role can we play in this picture? And from my perspective, it creates great opportunity, and there's huge opportunity on the horizon. And you can look at that any way you want to. You could equate it to being out in the ocean fishing, and you're 50 miles out, and the motor quits on the boat, and all of a sudden you spring a leak. And you can look on the horizon, and you can see the shore over there 50 miles away. Well, a lot of good that does you to look on the horizon and look for opportunities when you are sinking. And that's basically what's happening to our industry, and I think Bob Harrington eloquently displayed that this morning to you. So first of all, most of what we've discussed, or has been discussed here today, it needs some form of infrastructure for this to happen. And so first and foremost, we need to look at the infrastructure that's already in place and what we can do to preserve that infrastructure. Obviously, I think one of the most key questions I heard this morning, and a very good answer, was if all these mills have gone away prior to the actual economic disaster we're in today, what was that all about? And the answer was timber supply. And that's what it's all about, the lack of, per se, timber supply at an affordable rate. And that's what happens when the timber supply shrinks. Obviously the costs go up, and when the costs go up, it becomes non-economical, and that's why you see mills closing. So in our business in Deer Lodge, we handle some forms of biomass daily. I mean, many forms, actually, whether it be pulp logs to the pulp mill, or our wood chips to the pulp mill, or our sawdust and our shavings to the particle board plant over here at Roseburg, or bark for beauty bark, or even further yet at our own facility where we burn these residuals, or our bark in particular, to generate our own steam to dry our own lumber. So this is not new, and we've been doing it forever, it seems like, in the industry, and it works. And I'm glad to see that it's catching on. And it's going to grow legs, hopefully, and expand. If you don't believe that it's important that we protect and preserve the infrastructure that we currently have, then go to Wyoming or Utah or Arizona or Colorado or New Mexico or even the southern half of California, and you'll see the dilemma that they're faced with. Where they have no infrastructure, it's gone, totally gone. And as Bob said earlier, we're on the pivotal edge here in Montana, whether we're going to preserve our infrastructure or not, and be in the same precarious position that they are, where we can look at all this opportunity and there's nothing we can do about it. Because once it's gone, and it's very unlikely, as they're finding in Colorado and everywhere else, where they absolutely can't entice anybody to come in and build. It's very difficult. Expensive, for one thing, but also there's no surety, and so they're very hesitant, and it probably won't happen. So timber supply, access, availability, and affordability is what is necessary. Hence, that's why with our partner down at the end of the bench here, and Angela made me promise I wouldn't pick on them today, is extremely important, because in Montana, where we're near 70% on national forest lands, it's imperative that if we want to accomplish anything we've talked about today, we need them as a partner. It's imperative that they come to the table. Now, needing the Forest Service as a partner is very easy to say, but very difficult sometimes to accomplish, because there are many reasons over the past series of years why we've lost that. And you know, we can talk about budget constraints that they are faced with constantly that reduce their capability of producing, per se. And we can talk about many other constraints that they have, whether it be that the litigation they're faced with, the constant battle to be able to accomplish their goals or projects on the ground. They're just constantly bombarded, and as that happens, of course, costs go up, and when costs go up and budgets go down, then less is accomplished. And I think that's what we're seeing. I mean, it's not that he's not trying to accomplish anything. It's just that he's got his hands tied behind his back a lot of the time. So if you're out on this boat and you see the horizon and you see the opportunity, and you're going to have to dive in and swim 50 miles with your hands tied behind you, that's not very easy. And that's kind of what they're faced with. So obviously when they go overboard, they just go right to the bottom.
Untie the rock.
So at any rate, as Lance said back in 2006, a diverse group of individuals sat down and decided, you know, what are we going to do? We've got to do something. We can't just sit here and do nothing. In fact, it was a breath of fresh air to see that. Obviously, the gray hair that I have would tell you that I was around some 20 years ago when the battles were fought with the same people. Tom France in particular, I remember him sitting across the table, and it was just head to head. And obviously, we spent 20 years in gridlock and battling each other and accomplishing nothing. Absolutely nothing. We didn't get any more timber supply. We got less. And they obviously didn't get what they wanted, and that was a healthy forest that would provide good wildlife habitat and fisheries. It went the other direction. So now both of us have realized the mistakes we made of 20 years, and we've come to the table. And that's what the Beaverhead Deer Lodge Partnership is all about. It hasn't been easy. We've spent 3 years developing the strategy and then trying to, the outreach program to convince people that this is a good deal for everyone. It is a diverse group of conservationists and industry folks, but it's amazing when we got together and over the course of the 3 years and discussed our differences, how much we came together. And those differences weren't that dramatic. Nothing like it was 20 years ago. Now, probably 20 years ago, we didn't have that many differences either, except that we were unwilling to sit down and talk about it. Now, obviously in our outreach, and we've had over, I think, 175 or so, at least that many, meetings just in the Deer Lodge, Beaverhead Deer Lodge area, and not everyone agrees. It's just unbelievable to me that you can go in and present this wonderful program and not everybody thinks it's great. But that is life, and that's the way it is. And as we progress onward, that's the way it will be. Not everyone will agree, and of course that's what makes America what it is. We're able to voice our opinions openly and outwardly, and not everyone has to stand up and say 100% that that is a great idea, and I concur. But hopefully when the dust settles, most people will see that this is a good step forward to accomplish some things on the forest. Now, when we first sat down, we discussed how global should we make this, and should we do it a Montana project or maybe a Region 1 project, and it was decided, let's single out one forest. So we singled out, obviously, the largest acreage forest in Montana, and that was the Beaverhead Deer Lodge. If we can accomplish our goal and make things happen on this forest, we can possibly build from there. So that's what drove us to that forest in the first place. Now that was some 3 years ago, and obviously every year now more of the forest dies, and that's a sad reality, but that's nature doing its thing. The strategy reads that the objectives that has been created provides greater predictability and diffuses conflicts and implements meaningful projects on the ground. That was our objective from the beginning, and that's still our objective, is not to sit down and talk about it, but what can we get done on the ground. And then, as Lance had stated, it involves large landscapes, treatment of large landscapes that will allow us to be able, when we're done, to step back and say, yes, something was accomplished on the ground that is notable, and it is good for all the different partners. Big component of that is restoration, obviously. And there, on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge, there is tremendous opportunity for restoration. It happens to be one of the forests with the highest road densities than any other forest, up to 6 miles per section. And the forest plan itself is 1.5, but there again, with budget constraints and everything else, it doesn't allow them the opportunity to accomplish their own goals as prescribed in the forest plans. So restoration activities is a big piece of it. Protection of wildlife and fisheries, and then I always like it when our conservation partners talk about the timber piece. They're much more eloquent than I am when it comes to cutting trees, and I just once in a while have to sit back and say, In fact, Tom France, is probably one of our largest advocates. When we go together, he and I, to speak to groups, he stands up and I don't even need to say a word, because he advocates the need to cut trees and manage our forests versus what we see out there. I'm going to not belabor this any much too longer, but in summary, where are we in this process? Well, we're continuing extensive outreach throughout the area in hopes that we can gain more support. As in all efforts, not everybody will be happy when the final end result comes around, but hopefully the majority will. And always, as in anything, no one gets everything they want. And I think we've found that even dealing with each other, that not always do you get everything you want. But everyone gets something. And I think that's imperative, because currently no one is getting anything to speak of. And so it is imperative that everyone ends up getting something. Those who are unhappy, most are the all or none. You know, they just are not willing to move from their position. They want it all their way or not at all. And it's on both sides. And in fact, I get sometimes more disgruntled with the ones who used to be our advocates and now are our adversaries. And I say, what happened? You know, what happened? An incident I remember in particular was some ranchers. And they're just adamantly opposed to wilderness. Absolutely no more wilderness at any cost. And it just so happens, as I said, I've been around long enough, I recognize all of them. And they were the same ones who formed, some 20 years ago, the Big Hole Ranchers for Wilderness organization, and they proposed twice the wilderness that we have in our proposal. I asked them, what has changed in 20 years? Oh, that wasn't near this big. And I said, I remember the numbers. It was twice as much. Oh, no, it was just a little bit. But they've totally changed now for whatever reason, and we're not going to gain them back. That's just a reality, but that's life. So those are the problems that we need to solve. Where we're at, we're hoping that Senator Tester is taking a good look at this, and we're hoping that he is going to propose legislation in the near future that we can accomplish the goals that we've worked on for the last 3 years. And we think it's a great idea. And I'm still optimistic that everybody's going to love it when we're done. But probably not reality. And thank you much for asking me to participate, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Sherman. We have now, following closely on the heels of, is Gordy Sanders, who works for Pyramid Mountain Lumber, also from the industry perspective. And Gordy has been around the block some. He's worked for Champion, which used to be a significant force in Montana. He's worked for Plum Creek Timber, and he's now at Pyramid. He's been very active in the American Society of Foresters, and he also is a member of the Montana Forest Restoration Committee. So, Gordy, I know you have a multifaceted view in a lot of these things.
Thanks, Mary. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and share some thoughts and perspectives. And I think, I mean, it's great to see, as, you know, Sherm said a lot about the industry and how we've been in bioenergy, doing things for a long time. Was it, in the 50s or 60s, there were 26 teepee burners in the 5 valleys. So things have changed a lot. Well, taking a look at the, you know, our mission, or what we've been asked to do here today, access, you know, forest access and timber availability. And there is no silver bullet. Access means the right to enter or use. And accessible means easily approached, entered, or obtainable. And so there isn't anything easy about, you know, the task at hand, given the Forest Service and their major ownerships. And what you've been hearing here today, these numerous efforts to actually change the paradigm and get beyond gridlock and craft what success looks like on the ground. And for the industry, if we haven't learned anything over these years, and as Sherm said, the battles, nobody got anything, we can't do this by ourselves. We need partnerships. We need strategic alliances with a lot of different folks to help us move forward. Now, this quiet revolution has been going on among the remaining family-owned mills in rural communities across Montana. And increasingly, open and honest dialogue and discussion through a collaborative and cooperative approach, visiting about things at the landscape level and how treatments could actually become mutually beneficial. Conservation community members, timber industry, and community representatives have been creating collaborative and cooperative solutions that will end the battles, avoid the rhetoric, media posturing, and legal entanglements. And I think there's plenty of proof of that. Marnie talked about the Montana Forest Restoration Committee, and in the Bitterroot National Forest, with a active Bitterroot Restoration Committee, last year they actually had 3 decisions, EIS, EA, and a CE. And Dave, none of them got appealed or litigated, right? First time, and I'm not sure any of us can think that far back. Well, in restaurants, fire halls, and conference rooms, there's a lot of ongoing discussions. And traditional adversaries are sitting down, as Sherm said, crafting the common ground. You know what's different? We probably had, well, I know we had all this common ground 20, 30 years ago, but no one knew that because we never talked to each other. So helping one another achieve objectives is what collaboration is all about. And there are multiple ways of accomplishing that. And through the process of these interactions, you wind up crafting mutual objectives, focusing on the ground to see the right things done on the ground for the right reasons, truly end results focused. And that's another common piece that's going on. Not only is everybody, all the interest, disappointed in what they're getting off of national forest ground, but they're also focused on the ground. They want results. Well, paralleling these discussions have been growing local and national interest in sustaining our rural way of life, including the benefits of existing forest products industry. Without the mills, you know, somebody was telling me in New Mexico, you know, to do some kind of a treatment costs, it's somewhere between $2,000 and $10,000 an acre. To do what we've been doing around Montana, we're eating the cost. Not all the cost, right, sure? So when common sense folks sit down and take a look at the big picture, you know, they come to realize that, you know, we want to achieve stewardship and restoration objectives on the ground, and that there are benefits from thinning trees, providing raw materials to local sawmills, managing forest fuels and beetle-killed trees, and getting there, getting all these different interests to sit down. They have to be able to take a risk. And it also means that everybody involved has to stretch. Therein lies the reason Sherm says not everyone is going to be totally supportive of every single creative, collaborative thing that surfaces. Now, Pyramid believes the future of forested landscapes revolves around public-private partnerships and transparent collaborative solutions that implement active forest management on the ground to achieve desired future conditions. And when you consider climate change, as you heard earlier, desired must incorporate preparation to improve forest resilience down the road, species diversity, spatial diversity, structural diversity within the forest. And bringing together these diverse interests that understand ecology, economy, and community is how things are going to move forward. And it's perfectly natural in rural communities to have that kind of dialogue. And an example is the Blackfoot Clearwater Stewardship Project, which was developed over the last several years. We started the discussions in early 2005 when we were talking about, actually John Gatchell from the Wilderness Association and I were leaving a Lolo Forest Plan meeting, and I said, planning is great. Everyone has to have a plan, but if it isn't implemented on the ground, it really is just an exercise. And out of that, we picked different interests that would contribute to solidifying a proposal that focused solely on the Sea Lake Ranger District for a number of reasons. We've got the Elk Foundation, Wilderness Association, Wilderness Society, the local rancher. We've got snowmobile clubs, outfitters and guides, the Blackfoot Community Project, and Sea Lake community members. And the Forest Service has been involved as an advisor. And what we fully intended to do was craft an effort that fully implemented the forest plan, which also means designating wilderness, and providing resources for getting good work done on the ground, crafting the NEPA documents, having some kind of predictability of what we could anticipate, and others who would, of course, other companies would certainly benefit from having more activity on the ground and having the opportunity to pick up that volume or that work. And a biomass plant at Seeley Lake, which would be some kind of a public-private cost share. And this whole effort is what I said back in 1988.
I was waiting for that.
I didn't say that.
Is it that?
No,
No, we decided it wasn't that.
You got smoking?
See what they're trying to do to collaboration? They're trying to break it up.
Smoke, but it ain't.
You'll finish up.
Contracting officers, is everybody actually working together to try to implement the objectives on the ground. From the outside, other than some locations, it looks like kind of business as usual, where different folks have the ability to trump an effort or change it, or they're really not working that hard on the ground to actually understand each other's issues and values, and that would go a long ways to moving things. And the Forest Service is way too good at process. They're really good. They like that. Some projects are talked about for a dozen years. And a collaborative effort is not going to tolerate meeting year after year, month after month after year, you know, over that period of time. There has to be a way of moving things forward. But it isn't the Forest Service's fault, totally. You've got changing interim rules, regulations, laws, and maybe what would be helpful is to actually have some kind of a grandfather language that from a point in time, you don't have to keep going back and rewriting documents and reproducing maps and keep moving forward. And maybe congressionally defined categorical exclusion for beetle kills, salvage, time-sensitive types of projects would also be beneficial for the agency. Or maybe every time someone retires out, like Bruce, whenever you retire, then everybody else, you know, takes care of the work and they hire a young forester or natural resource professional to get on the ground. So we wind up changing this overhead and actually get more folks on the ground so we can get more work done, more field work that is so critical to moving things forward. And I think ID teams that are totally dedicated to vegetation management is more efficient and more effective to getting good work done on the ground. And then having those ID teams interact with others outside the agency, that's also helpful. Well, there's numerous possibilities of what could be beneficial in terms of moving things on federal forest land. Congressional directives, mandates, and legislative efforts could be helpful if it doesn't create another body of law, conflicting rules, regulations, and layers that continue to delay things. There's enough of that already. But the Forest Service is working very hard to try to move things, use all the tools in the toolbox, and we're seeing some light bulbs come on, more use of stewardship contracting, using collaboration successfully, increasing openness and transparency, and a little more can-do attitude, we can get it done. And I think even with limited resources, I know a lot of the direction in this region is even if the resources aren't there, get the work done and they'll find them. I'm not sure where Bruce finds those rabbits, but you guys do pretty well. We haven't talked about state lands much. The state continues to move forward, you know, diligently pursuing their trust mandate to return to the school trust. Private forest landowners, they're ranchers, doctors, attorneys, movie stars. They have their own long-term stewardship plans and objectives, which may or may not be available at a certain point in time for specific treatments. And since they provide 65 to 75% of all the raw materials we use at Pyramid, they're a critical supplier, but they also don't necessarily do things on the ground just because someone else thought it was a good idea. They have their own ideas. I'll leave you with a thought, a couple thoughts. Alston Chase was quoted as saying, "There's no such thing as leaving nature alone. People are part of creation. We do not have the option of not being good stewards of the land. We must master the art and science of good stewardship." And, last thought, vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. Thank you.
Before our last speaker, I just wanted to say that Governor Schweitzer certainly recognizes the need to have access to and available resources if we're moving forward, as we move forward on biomass energy and generation here in Montana. That's really a critical piece. He also recognizes the importance of these collaborative efforts, knowing that that's also an essential part of moving forward. We do have now a restoration coordinator in Montana for state government, focusing not only in forest restoration, but stream restoration, fire restoration, mining restoration, that kind of thing. But certainly forest restoration is a key part of our restoration coordinator's job duties. Governor Schweitzer has also written to the Forest Service and to the Secretary of Agriculture on particular projects that have been supported by a collaborative effort but may not be moving forward quite rapidly enough. One I think of is the Jocko Lakes salvage sale, which has come to fruition. And another most recent one is the Clancy Unionville, which is 10 years old, very well supported by collaborative efforts, but was stuck in the courts, finally came out, and Governor Schweitzer is urging the Forest Service to move forward as expeditiously as possible in this one. And finally, Governor Schweitzer also, with his concern for red trees, forest health, bark beetle infestations, knows that time is of the essence, and he's written to Secretary Vilsack asking if there aren't opportunities for some sort of an administrative alternative, particularly for those forests that are particularly hard hit by insect and disease, to move these forward more quickly in getting the harvest out and getting those resources available for biomass generation and for other purposes. So Governor Schweitzer is keenly aware of this, and I know our last speaker, and fortunately Bruce does have broad shoulders, that one of the objectives has been talking about our federal partnership and some of the ups and the downs and how the collaborative efforts have worked with and sometimes been frustrated by Forest Service, that often on the ground those closest to it have worked well, but as you go up the line to the bureaucracy, that sometimes there are snags along the way. Bruce is part of the Renewable Resource Management. He's the director of the Renewable Resource Management of this region, Forest Service region, the Northern Rockies. He has come to us from Idaho, but been here in Montana and at the Northern region since '89. And I know he sometimes feels like he doesn't get enough time riding his horses, but he's out there trying to find that sometimes unattainable balance between the many interests that are urging the Forest Service in one way or another. So Bruce, I know that you've been a subject of conversation this afternoon, and Bruce is not all of the Forest Service. He is one person in the Forest Service, and we certainly thank you for being here, Bruce.
Well, thank you, Mary. I have to start out by saying I really did miscalculate that when I had an employee of mine trip the fire alarm that this many of you would indeed come back. And I have to apologize because I do have a PowerPoint, but we'll go through it fairly rapidly here, if I can master the. I want to talk about three things real quickly, and we've talked about these in one way or another most of the day: timber availability, biomass utilization, and cooperative efforts. This is just another way of showing some of the information that Todd Morgan shared this morning. The decline in national forest timber sales of 80% from the 1960s. Oh, my little pointer went dead again. To 2000. And you know, it dawned on me this morning when Governor Schweitzer was talking about the extreme positions that people might have on climate change. This is another example of extreme positions in my mind. There's probably not that many people in the room that would suggest that we ought to be back up at this level, but I would also suggest there's not probably many people in the room that think it's okay to be down at this level. This is a chart that just shows kind of our recent accomplishments, and looking at this chart of the northern region and our accomplishment in terms of timber harvest, we mirror that national chart very well. We came off a very steep decline, kind of hit rock bottom about 2003, and we've been trying to build a positive trend since then that's starting to look something like this. But you can see we did pretty good for a couple of years, and we fell back down. And now we're trying to rebuild that trend line. Well, wrong way. Well, I added another bar here that does explain, in my mind, a lot of why that fall down occurred. And this bar is the litigation we deal with in the northern region. And in 2006, we had nearly 550 million board feet tied up in the federal court system. And you can see how that's directly affecting what we're able to accomplish. Fortunately, through efforts that my colleagues on the panel have talked about, that amount is declining. That's a very positive trend for the litigation. Hopefully that will continue. Just real quick, Sherm mentioned the budget pressures. We started out the 2009 initial budget down nearly $4 million in our program areas, and a target level much below where we were last year, which was a great concern for us. We went to working with a lot of help from folks in this room, and through a number of avenues we've secured an additional amount of money and are now projecting an output level of around 300 million board feet, which will be higher than we've been at for some time in the northern region. That's going to allow us to complete the fire salvage projects we've had underway for a couple of years, increase our regular program, and get to work on the mountain pine beetle infestation that we've all talked about today. The National Forest System side is just one side. I also want to mention the state and private side that the Forest Service has. And we bring significant amount of financial resources to Montana through these avenues. We had a $2 million hazardous fuel supplemental that came to Montana earlier this year. Competitive grants have been running about $1 million per year in Montana. Biomass grants have primarily been the fuels for schools, but we're getting requests in other areas, and hopefully we'll see some of those to fruition. And of course, the economic stimulus money that we've been dealing with, and we've seen the first 10% of that allocation in this area here. And just Friday, we did get information on the hazardous fuel piece for the state of Montana. And we have about $12.5 million that's coming to Montana, and $8.9 million of that is on the state and private side. And we welcome that because, quite frankly, on the state and private side, we have the state's going to have the ability to put that to work faster than we would on the National Forest side due to the federal processes which we have to follow. So we're thankful for that. The economic stimulus project selection continues. Our forests have submitted project work that's going to greatly help the feasibility of our timber sale projects, including BMP work, road decommissioning, reforestation, fuel reduction, et cetera. And it's just a great opportunity that we have in the next couple of years to get a lot of very important restoration work done and also improve the feasibility of our timber sales in a very challenging market. I also wanted to mention a policy that we put in place now a couple of years ago. We added contract provisions to all of our timber sales that at a minimum require skidding and decking of non-saw timber material with the idea that the market will take it out of the woods from there. Unless there's a good resource reason that we do this, this is a requirement. In the first year we implemented that, we saw a tripling of the non-saw timber type material that associated with our timber sales that was moving off our national forest. That's declined with the decline in harvest activity due to the market conditions recently, but it is making a big difference. We've also just finished cooperating in a crop study. For those of you familiar with crop studies, that's a coordinated resource offering protocol that looks at the biomass that's planned for harvest in 3 working circle areas that are listed here. And that's going to be information that's valuable for future investments in biomass. I want to talk for a second about cooperative efforts. We launched on what we called our Integrated Restoration Protection Strategy several years ago. It really came out of the National Fire Plan effort and an emphasis on dealing with hazardous fuels and treatment and protection of our communities. But we wanted it to be more than just about hazardous fuels, recognizing that we need to restore our fire-adapted ecosystems across the northern region and also look at opportunities to accomplish other resource objectives while we're doing this work. We boiled it down into 4 basic themes, and they're listed here. We mapped resource values associated with these themes, overlaid those maps of those values, and came up with a priority map for the northern region that's portrayed here, 5 levels of priority. As we visited with this, we became aware that Montana DNRC had done a very similar project called the Spatial Analysis Project, looking at very similar resource values, using a point grid system to overlay those values and developing 3 levels of priority. And they had a map of high priority areas on non-industrial private timberlands in the state of Montana. As we talked, we recognized that we didn't have the complete picture between ourselves either. And so we talked with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, who also has a comprehensive conservation strategy, with an idea of broadening their conservation focus and particularly to prevent listing of T&E species. And this was one of the early versions of their maps, looking at vegetation communities of greatest conservation need in the state. So we visited with BLM. They didn't have a priorities map geospatially, but they had a listing of their priority projects, so we overlaid those projects. Well, we ended up, so the question you come to is where are those areas, those high priority areas in BLM, Montana State Trust lands, private timberlands, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, tribal, Forest Service, where are those areas at? And that led to the formation of what we now call the Montana Multi-Agency Integrated Restoration and Protection Strategy. Our resource focus has really remained the same. It's just across a broader jurisdictional area. Our management focus is to increase effective collaboration between multiple agencies and landowners, to have projects in the same general area designed to meet common objectives, and to more effectively answer the question of why do we need to do this work here and now. This is an example of one of our pilot projects around Butte, Montana. The green area is National Forest. The crosshatched is where we had planned work on National Forest. The pink area is the darkest pink, is the highest priority non-industrial private timberlands. Blue, Montana State Trust lands. This would be BLM, and you can see the opportunities to coordinate and collaborate our work just jump out at you. We've also started a similar pilot this year in the Blackfoot area. Our intent is really not to change individual priorities or the nature of the work that an individual entity to do, but it is our intent to leverage each other's priorities and obtain support, scarce funding, and protect each other's investments. The collective benefits, I think, are pretty obvious. Broader public support, a laser focus for identifying critical landscapes across the state, achieving multiple resource objectives and community benefits, many benefits. The outcomes are the things that we're all interested in. Engaged, protected communities, protected municipal water supplies, proper functioning watershed and fisheries habitat, and healthy, resilient forest and wildlife habitat. I just wanted to again mention some of the cooperative efforts, and I think they've all been talked about, and we've got many other local collaborative efforts going on around the region, and these efforts are making a difference, and I think it's largely one of the reasons that the amount of litigation that we're seeing is declining. So just in summary, the northern region is working hard to accomplish many important projects. We're making a concerted effort to make our timber sale offerings as economically feasible as possible in these difficult timber markets. And we stand ready to do our part in economic recovery in terms of providing jobs and accomplishing important resource work. And I see I have 1 minute, and I'm going to use it in this way. Mary kind of challenged us, or one of the questions put forward to the panelists were, what would I change if I could? That's a dangerous question for a federal bureaucrat, and one I could probably get myself in a lot of trouble with, but I'm going to answer it in this manner. Todd Morgan and others have done a good job of laying out information that pretty squarely puts the bullseye on the U.S. Forest Service in the state of Montana. And we accept and understand that very well. And it reminds me of one of my favorite sayings that goes something like this: if you want an argument, we're going to have to pick another topic. But I would remind us and it's been alluded to by some of the panelists, that the Forest Service land management processes and framework is the product of the laws that Congress has passed and the regulations that go along with those laws. In my mind, it's just like the issue of timber supply versus availability. It's not the supply, it's the availability. I don't think our issue is identifying those changes that would streamline federal processes. We've talked about them for many years. We could make a long list of them. We've even seen examples where Congress has attempted to help us streamline those processes, only to have those legislative changes litigated and roadblocked. In my mind, the question is, how much agreement must we have before we can move forward? We've heard examples of collaborative efforts where groups, a broad cross-section of interest can come together and agree, and still one group or one individual in our model that we're working with today can stop that from moving forward. And I would offer that some level of agreement, less than full consensus by even those who don't want to participate, is not a model that's going to serve us well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you all the panelists. As you can see, it's a challenging puzzle that we have here, given litigation, accessibility, availability, collaboration, and all these wonderful things. We are a little bit over time, and I don't know if you want a few moments for some questions, because this is really a tremendous panel with some really interesting insight into these challenging problems. Do we have a few minutes? Yes. Okay. 5 minutes. Come on, let's fire away the questions. Or is it too late in the afternoon? Doesn't one really good question? No. Yes, Todd.
I have a question. It's kind of related to some of the stuff that Bruce mentioned. Are the ARRA or the stimulus funds, are they going to be potentially subject to fire borrowing this year? So can we expect the money that's supposed to hit the ground in Region 1 to be spread all over the fires in California, or will all that money definitely come to the ground here?
I don't think those funds will be subject to fire borrowing. Those funds don't even technically come to the Forest Service. We'll have management codes to charge to, but we won't actually have the money. And I think Congress hopefully is taking some steps that will alleviate the need to do fire borrowing anyway. Hopefully we'll be successful there.
Another burning question. Yes, sir.
For Gordy and Sherm, wilderness has been more or less a permanent designation. And in your quid pro quo for timber harvest, what is your permanent cut?
Go ahead. I'll address that because I think we have more surety in ours than he does. That discussion has come up continually through the process, and on our side, as was mentioned by Lance, that we're advocating a minimum of 7,000 acres annually, and that the language that's drafted into the piece of legislation would be, that's exactly what it would call for, and it would call for the Forest Service to report back to Congress annually if they are accomplishing what was dictated to them by legislation. So that's our form of surety that it will get done.
And
what was that?
Not appealable.
It is appealable, of course. Yeah, we discussed early on the facets of law, and just like Bruce said, we're not in a position where we want to tackle that and take away people's rights. I mean, that's what this country's all about. And so it does not exempt it from appeal or litigation, no.
the approach we took on the Blackfoot is a little different in that, one, on the question of appeal, we didn't change that. However, we do have language that specifically makes it mandatory before you can appeal or litigate, you have to have a mandatory sit down with the monitoring committee and or stakeholders in regard to the project. And that's significantly different than there isn't anything else out there even that requires that. In other words, you can't go to court unless you do that. They couldn't get that through in HFRA. The other thing is the approach we took in terms of treatment or harvest level is we have an expectation, when you provide resources to a location that has say the ability to actually perform, then we're going to get decisions. If you don't get the decisions done, if they don't have the resources to get the decisions done, then nothing happens on the ground. So what we're thinking in the Blackfoot is over a 10-year period for this pilot, and we're looking at 40 million feet that'll surface during that time, which is about 4 million feet a year, but it's not locked in stone. Most of us would rather have that front-loaded as much as possible to provide additional dollars, in a goods for services approach to actually do more work, more analysis, and grow the efforts on the ground. And we've got a built-in monitoring committee that I think would be very helpful too.
One more question? I guess not. Then I really want to thank all the panelists for this stimulating conversation, and I'm sure that will continue to be a good discussion. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Bill Hagney. He's the Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development for USDA back in Washington, D.C. Runs a variety of traditional programs, and one of the new ones is renewable energy, and the programs and funding that go along with that. Bill has won awards for his work in rural development, and he's also won awards for creating efficiency in government. So with that, no further ado, Bill.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you. You can do better than that. Good afternoon to you. There you go. That's what I like. Okay, which way do these arrows work? No. This side. Roller. There we go. Okay, I do represent the Rural Development Mission Area of USDA. USDA is huge. There's over 100,000 employees USDA-wide, and the Forest Service composes about 30,000 of those. Our mission area is the third largest mission area in the department, and we have over 6,000 employees that are spread throughout the United States that deliver our programs at the state and local level. Only 500 of those 6,000 employees are located in the D.C. area, and 5,500 are distributed throughout the United States. And there are several federal employees located here in Montana that serve you at the state level and the local level and delivering a variety of our programs. A little about rural development. Our objectives is to increase economic opportunities in rural areas while providing and improving the quality of life for rural residents. One of the things that the President mentioned when he first, as a part of his energy platform, was that he wanted rural development to benefit from renewable energy development, and that he wanted the renewable energy systems and et cetera to support economic development in rural areas and provide quality jobs. And here's a quote by the President from his commitment to renewable energy: to put people back to work today and reduce our dependency on foreign oil tomorrow, we will double renewable energy production. And he's going about that in some of the initiatives that he's announced recently, and I'm going to mention a couple of those here in just a few minutes. Also, our Secretary Vilsack. As acting Deputy Undersecretary, I've had the fortune of working with Secretary Vilsack face-to-face, one-on-one, traveling with him some, listen to some of his views of what he envisions our department, how our department can contribute to renewable energy development. And I can tell you the man has a deep passion for renewable energy development and supporting the President's platform. And here's a quote by Secretary Vilsack. Keep going the wrong way. I want to talk to you about a variety of programs that were authorized in the 2008 Farm Bill, and they're listed here. But before I do that, I don't know if you're aware, but the President issued a directive back on May the 5th to the two Secretaries of Energy and Agriculture and to the Administrator of EPA. And he mandated the two Secretaries and the Administrator of EPA to develop a more collaborative way of working together to assist in bringing accessibility of renewable energy and renewable fuels to rural areas. As a part of that directive, there were several programs, not mentioned by name, but by description, that he's mandated the Secretary to have up and running within the next 30 days. And those programs are listed here, not by name, but by description. First program, and these programs are the Biomass BCAP program, the Biomass Crop Assistance Program, Biorefinery Assistance Program, Bioenergy Program for Advanced Biofuels, Rural Energy for America Program, REAP, and the Bioresearch and Development Initiative. I keep going the wrong way. There you go. I got the first program I wanted to talk to you about is the BCAP program, the Biomass Crop Assistance Program. What's unique about this program? This is the first time in the history of the department that we've had a program that's solely devoted to assisting ag producers not only plant energy crops, but to harvest those energy crops and provide those and transport those energy crops to biorefineries. This is a challenge to the department. Before we can implement this, I heard earlier on the mention of EIS, environmental impact statements. We're of the opinion that we're going to have to conduct an environmental impact statement before we can implement this program, just because of the environmental sensitivity of the program, the impact it potentially have on the important land resources that we have the responsibility for protecting. The program, once implemented, and they're in the process of conducting the EIS as we speak. So this program is about a year away from being implemented, but it's going to be a very, very valuable tool in assisting these farmers through payments to them to help subsidize the cost of not only planting, but harvesting and marketing and transporting these biofuels to a biorefinery. The second one is a program that our missionary has, and by the way, the first program I described, the Farm Service Agency within the department has the responsibility for administering that program. The second program is the Biorefinery Assistance Program, which is a program that provides both grants for demonstration scale type facilities. That's facilities that have went through the research and development. We're talking about non-corn starch based types of biomass type of biorefinery facilities where they have advanced, the technology's advanced to the research and development phase, and they're ready to build a demonstration plant to show the commercial viability of this technology. So this program authorizes grants for that purpose. It also authorizes, once the demonstration or pilot scale has successfully proven that this technology can be developed and constructed and be financially feasible at a viable commercial scale, then it allows us to provide loan guarantees to assist with the financing of these facilities. Some of these facilities are going to be very expensive, and they'll be first of the kind. Some of these facilities will cost $750 to $1 billion probably to build. Our loan guarantee limit for the loan guarantee program is $250 million. The largest loan guarantee program we had to date before this program was authorized was a $25 million maximum program. So this is a significant leap for us at the department in the size of investments that we will be engaged in. The limitations for the grant program is 50% of the project cost. Can be provided through this grant, and there is mandatory money available for the loan guarantee program only. There is no grant funding available for the grant demonstration program, but there is an authorization for it. And I do envision in the coming years there will be funds appropriated for the demonstration phase of this authority, because there's a lot of need for the federal government to be involved in helping finance some of these demonstration plants. They're very expensive to construct, and the private sector is just not in a position to finance the construction of these without some federal assistance. So there's $75 million available this year for the loan guaranteed portion, which is a viable commercial scale type of facilities. That translates to around $225 million of supportable loan level. That's the cost of the program shown there. And there's $245 million available for the balance of the Farm Bill. We have developed a loan guarantee program and got it up and running in 5 months. It normally takes 2 years to get a loan guarantee program up and running. And believe me, I have some hair that's lost as a result of it. My hair is grayer than it was 6 months ago when we started this process. It was a very intense initiative within the department to get this up and running. We've actually successfully awarded our first loan guarantee to Range Fuel, that's shown there, for an $80 million loan guarantee where they're using wood chips as a biomass to convert into ethanol in Georgia. And this project will create 63 jobs and produce over 20 million gallons of cellulosic ethanol per year once it is constructed, and it's under construction as we speak. We had, we had 2 rounds, windows. The first window we had 5 applications. 3 applications were not complete. Range Fuel was one of the 2 that was complete. We're working on a second application now as we speak for another $25 million. And what this application is taking a facility that uses cornstarch-based process and adding a cellulosic component to it to add a biomass resource to the process. And that's a $25 million, and it's about ready to hopefully be announced. We went through the technical review of it. It's been successful, and hopefully within the next few weeks we'll be announcing that project. Keep going the wrong way. Okay, the next program, which is kind of unique to the Farm Bill, is this program is to assist biorefineries that existed prior to the enactment of the Farm Bill. What this program does, it provides payments to these biorefineries to assist them in offsetting some of the cost for them to retool their facilities to replace fossil fuel energy sources for heat and power with renewable energy sources. So in other words, instead of using natural gas, they would use a biomass material as their energy source for heat and power. And there is $35 million available for this program. We are just weeks away, 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully. We can get OMB to cooperate with us in getting this program announced. And there will be a competition for the funding. The notice of funding availability will provide the details for the applications, the priorities that the department has put on the applications for funding. And in addition to the $35 million that is available, we have $15 million per year discretionary authority where Congress, through the appropriation process, can add additional money. Then the Bioenergy program for advanced biofuel producers. Again, this is a program that supports the production of advanced biofuel. And if you're aware of the requirement in the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 for a new renewable fuel standard where 21 billion gallons of renewable fuel are to be produced from non-cornstarch-based types of feedstocks by the year 2022. And this program helps support biorefineries that are producing this advanced biofuel by assisting them in reducing the cost of the production of this advanced biofuel. What's unique about this program, it's a non-competitive program. Anyone that qualifies, that qualifies, gets a piece of the funding that's available. There is no competition. And we are looking at both existing production of advanced biofuel as well as new production being proposed. There will be a differential in the payment made for existing payments for existing production of fuel versus advanced, where advanced will be given a larger ratio of the payments, but we will be looking at paying both for existing and new production under this program. Then the program has, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way again. Mandatory funding for this program is around $55 million in this year. You can see how the money increases each fiscal year. One thing I forgot to mention, the Title IX of the Farm Bill received over $1 billion of mandatory funding over the 5 years of the Farm Bill. That's a huge amount of money over the life of the Farm Bill. And what mandatory money is, it's available. It doesn't have to go through the appropriation process. So each fiscal year, come October 1, the money that's been appropriated for that year through the mandatory funding is readily available. And we can move with the program. We don't have to wait on appropriations. And so you can see the funding level there. You can also see there is an authority for discretionary funding that's available there for $25 million more for each year that can be provided through the appropriation process. Then the next program I want to talk to you about is a program that actually was authorized in the 2002 Farm Bill. It was called the Renewable Energy Systems Energy Efficiency Program under the 2002 Farm Bill. And to confuse everyone, including us at the department, it was renamed in the 2008 Farm Bill, the Rural Energy for America Program, and it's under a new section. It's under Section 9007 instead of 9006 of the Farm Bill. This program supports ag producers and rural small businesses. And a rural small business, rural means any unincorporated facility located in any unincorporated area of rural America, and any incorporated city or town of 50,000 or less. A city or town of more than 50,000, not only is the incorporated limits not considered rural, but the urbanized area, the bedroom community of those cities are not considered rural for this program. These ag producers and rural small businesses, and small business is the definition of SBA uses for small business for the type of industry that we're financing. So the ag producers and rural small businesses can benefit through grants and loan guarantees to assist them in constructing renewable energy systems or doing energy efficiency improvements on their business or farming operation. The 2008 Farm Bill added a couple of whistles and bells. It added the authority for us to provide grants to conduct energy audits for these ag producers and rural small businesses. And these are done through a grant awarded to institutions of higher learning, rural cooperatives, nonprofit organizations, and they in turn take the money. They use these grant funds to support the funding of individual energy audits for ag producers and rural small business. The ag producer or rural small business has to contribute 25% of the cost of the audit, and the grants used to match 75% of that cost. Also, for the first time, this program can be used to fund feasibility studies. A lot of, especially ag producers, can't afford to have a feasibility study done on their own. They're just too expensive. Sometimes they run $5,000 to $6,000 or more. So now we can actually fund the feasibility study to assist this small producer in developing the feasibility to determine the marketability of developing a renewable energy system or doing energy efficiency improvements on their farm. The funding levels, the loan guarantee limitation is $25 million. It can be up to 75% of the project cost. There is 25%. It must come from another source. You see the mandatory funding there for the respective fiscal years. In addition to the $55 million that's shown there for 2009, Congress provided $5 million more of funding under a discretionary program this year to show you the interest in this program. And in 2010, the President announced his budget last week. There is a substantial amount of additional discretionary funds being proposed by the President for this program. In addition to that, it can be up to $25 million by fiscal year discretionary funding. This shows you how this program has been used in the past. This chart shows you the types of renewable energy systems and energy efficiency improvements that can be made. The technologies are shown there on the left. Biomass can be to support anaerobic digesters, biodiesel, ethanol facilities. Wind can be both small and large wind, solar, geothermal, and then we have a few that were hybrid, which are one or two of the above type technologies that were combined. In addition to the ones listed, the 2008 Farm Bill added hydroelectric as an eligible technology and ocean wave energy. Now, you don't have much ocean wave energy here in Montana. But on the West Coast and the East Coast, there is a lot of possibilities in the sounds and stuff for the development of ocean wave energy. You can see the number of awards. What we're very proud of is the amount of leveraged funds there. If you look at the grand total at the bottom, almost $1.6 billion of leveraged funds to the $248 million that we have provided over the life of this program. To give you an example how the energy efficiency portion of this has been used, in the Midwest there's a lot of grain elevators. A lot of these grain elevators have age on them. And they've got very dilapidated and very inefficient drying systems and motors to run those drying systems. It's been used out here to replace those motors and drying systems with energy efficiency type, more energy efficiency type of equipment, sometimes reducing the power demand by a third. And so that's the energy efficiency part of the program. In the Deep South, a lot of poultry producers, same situation. Outdated mechanical equipment that's been replaced by energy efficiency equipment, and in some cases we have reduced the energy consumption by 40% on some of those projects. So that gives you an idea of the volume and the breakdown of the various renewable energy sources this program can support. One program that I want to briefly describe, and I know that Valerie is going to talk more about it, is the Biomass Research and Development Board and the initiative. This is an initiative that's co-chaired between DOE and USDA, and there is 2 members each from USDA and DOE on this board. The board is authorized by statute. The board is made up of all federal departments, very high-level ranking officials in the federal departments, normally a political appointee that's went through the confirmation process, that come together as a board to discuss ways of delivering our programs and assisting in the development of not only biofuels but bioproducts within the United States. And one of the things that this board was successful in doing at the end of the last administration was to publish a National Biofuels Action Plan, and there's a reference to that there that outlines some of the challenges that the department has that the departments have identified in deploying the biofuel industry within the United States. And Valerie will talk more about this initiative in just a few minutes. Very quickly, program delivery. How do we deliver our programs? I mentioned earlier, we have a national office, we have 47 state offices, we have area offices. This is our contact information. I encourage you to go to this website to learn more about our programs. There's a map there of the United States. You can click on Montana. It will give you all the locations of our offices, contact information, emails, phone numbers, names of individuals to contact, areas of responsibility. I'd encourage you again to navigate this website and learn more about our programs. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, sir. Let Valerie come up. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and we'll do questions after Valerie comes up, and we can do them jointly, right, Tom? So Valerie Leitner is also from Washington, D.C. She works in the Energy Department. She's the Biomass Program Manager there, and in the past she has done fuel cell technology development that deals with transportation. She's led a team on that, and she led a team worked on efficiencies in the pulp and paper industries. Valerie Leitner.
Trying to get the instructions on the how to use move the slides. I'm really impressed that so many of you are still here so late in the day, but what I'm going to talk about is I'll give you an overview of the biomass program, talk about some of our goals, our challenges. I'll let you know about some of the funding opportunities that are currently available. I'll also talk to you about the recovery and some of the opportunities from our program through the recovery, and a little bit about the interagency activities that Bill had mentioned. Oh, it's down. The overall mission of our program is to take the abundant sources we have in the United States of biomass and produce fuels, power, and products from those. So, you know, there's a lot of different types of biomass sources available in the country. There's regional differences. So in different regions of the countries, we'll use different biomass, and there will be different opportunities for those, and we try to help out in all those areas. Our program at this time is heavily focused on biofuels. So while our overall mission area encompasses biopower and bioproducts, because of first there was a the former president, President Bush, set out a goal to make cellulosic ethanol cost competitive with corn-based ethanol. And so that was a big focus and has been a big focus of our program. And then in December of 2007, Congress passed the Renewable Fuel Standard, or RFS2, I guess you could call it, that significantly increased the amount of renewable fuels that needed to be used in the transportation fuels, up to 36 billion gallons a year by 2022. And our program, like Bill had mentioned, is focused on the advanced and cellulosic portion of that, which is 21 billion gallons a year, and it's shown in the green portions up here. So this bottom bar is where the standard was before December 2007. So that was the requirement for 2012, you know, prior to 2007. And then it was significantly increased. And so this is the portion that our program focuses on. You probably are also aware that last week the EPA issued their proposed rulemaking on how to evaluate the greenhouse gas implications to meet this standard. There are requirements, there's checks and balances that Congress put in this, so that if you were deploying conventional technology, you had to have a greenhouse gas emission reduction of 20% compared to a 2005 baseline. For advanced biofuels, it had to be a 50% reduction, and for cellulosic, it had to be a 60% reduction. And that rulemaking was a proposal of how they plan to make those calculations, and it's available for a 60-day comment period. The current technology, so the yellow bar on there, is mostly within the United States corn-based ethanol. Our program is really focused, and I guess the federal government kind of in general is focused on the higher risk, long-term R&D, things that industry can't do on its own, that really needs federal support. So as I'd mentioned, historically we had really been focused on cellulosic ethanol, and so even if you look at our program plans and things, a lot of the materials that we have written, they're still written in this way. We've expanded to be more broad and to really focus on advanced biofuels and to help develop those technologies that could potentially contribute to the 21 billion gallons a year by 2022. And we're currently working to update our strategy and plan to better focus on this broader mission rather than looking very cellulosic ethanol centric. But it's a work in progress that we hope to have completed by the end of the calendar year. In our program, we focus across the supply chain. Historically, we worked predominantly in the biofuels production area, so the conversion of biomass into products or fuel. We've had historically a small program in feedstock logistics also, so the harvesting, collection, storage, transport, pre-treatment of the biomass, the cellulosic biomass from the field to the biorefinery. In the last couple of years, we've expanded to do some work in feedstock production in conjunction with USDA, and also to start to look at the end use, so the distribution of the biofuels from the plant gate to the vehicle tank, and the use in engines. In the feedstock production area, we work, like I mentioned, in conjunction with USDA, and we have a regional feedstock partnership. It's run with 5 centers across the United States, and they do different kinds of field trials focused on cellulosic materials, trying to understand things like water uptake, soil and soil quality, nutrient uptake, trying to minimize the impacts and make the development and the growing of the biomass sustainable, and really trying to understand those factors. And so the solid bars, the solid squares are the field trials that have been planted thus far. I know it's difficult over here to see the slides, I'm sorry, because I was sitting over here, so you guys can shift. There's seats over this way too. And then the open squares are the ones that the plantings are planned, but they haven't been planted yet. And it's focused on, like I said, a regional diversity, so different kinds of feedstock. We have some woody feedstock trials of poplar and willow, energy cane, switchgrass, sorghum, the like. And this is an area that actually will be getting, our 2010 budget was also announced last week, and we will be increasing the feedstock area and enhancing the amount of sustainability data we're collecting in these field trials. In the R&D area and conversion, we focus on two main areas, a biochemical route and a thermochemical route for converting biomass to fuels. We really focus on the unit operations that tend to be the most the highest cost unit operations. So for the biochem process, it's the converting the enzymes into sugars with, converting the cellulose into sugars using enzymes, and the enzymes tend to be expensive, and so trying to reduce the cost of those enzymes, making them more efficient. And then also it's expensive to convert those sugars to fuels. So the fermentation organisms, trying to develop fermentation organisms that can handle dirty sugars instead of a clean sugar stream. Possibly fermentation organisms that might be able to handle different types of sugars, C5 and C6 sugars. In the thermochem process, the program has historically focused on gasification, but in the last 18 months or so, we ran a solicitation and started some activity on pyrolysis as well. And in the gasification area, we've focused mainly on the cleanup of the synthesis gas that comes out of a gasifier and the conversion of that syngas to fuels. In the pyrolysis area, we're working on the stabilization of the bio oil and the conversion of that to fuels primarily. Those are the steps that tend to be the most costly. Across the bottom of the slide, we have a new area of algae to fuels. We really have very little work going on in this area. There was a university solicitation that was broadly focused on advanced biofuels, and we started a couple of projects in this area. But we hosted a workshop last December to bring stakeholders together to identify what are really the research needs for algae to biofuels. We expect to release the initial results of that workshop this month, and we're going to get stakeholder comment on that and then issue a final roadmap in July is the plan for that. So I'm not sure. Yeah, that was my next slide. So there's two ways to move slides, I just learned. In our biorefinery demonstration programs, we try to bring that all together. We have two scales of biorefinery projects right now, a commercial scale, which is based on 700 dry tons per day of feedstock going in, and we have a demonstration scale, which is based on 70 dry tons going in. For the commercial scale biorefineries, we have 4 projects that have been selected, and of these have been underway for a couple of years. We have these phased, and the demonstration projects are phased the same way. The first phase is to complete engineering design, do environmental permitting, meet NEPA compliance. You guys seem to be familiar with that. The second phase is to do the construction, so to move into the construction phase, and it goes through shakedown. And then the third phase is to collect some operational data from that operating biorefinery. And of these 4 projects, 2 have moved into the construction phase, and that's Range Fuels, which Bill mentioned that project as well, and Poet. And so for the Range Fuels project, this is the same project that they have that USDA is that was accepted for a USDA loan guarantee. So it's the non-federal portion of that they're backing the loan for part of that. And then we have 8 projects that are the smaller scale projects. These projects are all still in the first phase, completing their engineering design and their environmental permitting. On the end use, the distribution, the infrastructure, and the end use, right now we've mainly been doing small studies on the infrastructure piece, pipeline feasibilities, looking at storage tanks, that kind of thing, not really doing a whole lot of research, and we've been doing that in conjunction with the Department of Transportation and some other federal agencies. Where we have invested some funds is evaluating the impact of intermediate blends of ethanol on legacy vehicles and small engines. And we've been doing this work for about 18 months. And over the 2 years, we've invested, I think if you count funds from other agencies, it's about $20 million. And we're collecting data that will help inform a decision by EPA, because EPA has the authority to say that a fuel is substantially similar to gasoline. And there was a waiver request that was put in the end of February, requesting that EPA evaluate E15 as a sub-sim waiver is what they request, substantially similar. And so the data that we're collecting here on evaporative emissions, lifetime, et cetera, can be used by EPA to help inform a scientific decision on that request. They have 9 months to make a decision, so we expect their decision by December. So the end of the year. The initial testing from the DOE results have been that there have been some cases where there's an elevated exhaust temperature coming out of the engine of some of the legacy vehicles. That's typically associated with an engine that doesn't have a control system to handle an enhanced amount of oxygenate in the fuel. We do understand that this can lead to catalyst degradation, although we have not seen catalyst degradation at this time. But we're continuing to test those vehicles, and the plan is to test them through about April of 2010 to get the full useful life data. But we'll be continuing to put out interim reports with results as they become available to help inform the EPA's decision. We've also done some testing on higher blends on the higher blends on small engines, and that testing has been a little bit more difficult to interpret. Some of the quality of those engines is variable, and they have variable lifetimes from the beginning, and so there's just such a different variety of those kinds of engines out there. To try to get the whole breadth of them will be a challenge, but we're doing some testing in that area. As far as the solicitations that we have open right now, and so funding opportunities that are active, Bill said that I would mention about the initiative. So there's a $25 million solicitation. It's in 2 phases. The first phase is closed. This is a program that we run jointly between DOE and USDA. The USDA funds $20 million out of the farm bill that he mentioned, and then $5 million is out of DOE funds. And unlike USDA, we don't have any mandatory funds, so all of our funding is subject to annual appropriations. The first round of pre-applications that The should have been notified, letters should have gone out on Friday. So if any of you are in part of groups that might have applied to that, you should hear very soon about the results of your pre-application. And I believe from an email that I saw just today after I got here, I think we've extended the deadline for the full applications to June 15th. But don't quote me on that. But I believe that's what I saw. Additionally, under our Clean Cities program, which is focused more broadly than just ethanol and biofuels, it's on alternative fuels in general, but ethanol and E85 fits in, and they've had a solicitation for expanding infrastructure and education and outreach. And, you know, E85 is one of the fuels that would qualify under that. And then they have a pretty large program that was expanded through the recovery of up to $300 million for alternate fuels and vehicle pilots. So it's actually making adjustments to vehicles or building vehicles that would operate on alt fuels, and then building the fueling stations or adding a E85 pump at a fueling station, that kind of thing. We've also had a solicitation in our program that had been open for since December 22nd that was just amended last week as a result of the recovery. It was originally for up to $200 million for integrated biorefineries focused on biofuels as the primary product. It was expanded to be up to $480 million of federal funds. Still for the same size of project, a pilot scale project being based on at least 1 dry ton per day feedstock going in, a demonstration project being based on 50 dry tons feedstock going in. But now the primary products can be a biofuel or a bioproduct, and applications are due at the end of June. We also have a feedstock logistics solicitation that's looking at demonstrating the technologies to take cellulosic materials from the field into the biorefinery plant gate, and applications under that solicitation are due the 18th of this month. And this slide just shows where we have projects across the country. You know, like I mentioned, that there's a lot of different feedstocks that you can use, a lot of different conversion processes, and we work with a lot of different stakeholders across the country to try to develop a portfolio of technologies that could ultimately meet the nation's energy needs. This just shows the breakout of our funding distribution for 2009. And I guess I'll just highlight, a lot of it is in the demonstration area. So for our biorefinery projects, the areas that are growing in 2010 are the feedstocks area, and mostly, as I mentioned, that's to enhance the sustainability, collect additional data that would help us really define that better. And also in the thermochemical area, there will be some growth in the thermochemical area. Under the recovery, I mentioned there's a few things on here that might be of interest. There was authority in the loan guarantee program that would include biorefineries. There's also some tax credits that have been extended and some modifications made to those to allow grants equal to 30% of the investment tax credit and those kinds of things. Within my parent office, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, our program got, actually, it was $16.8 billion. The majority of that in the recovery was to states for block grants and state energy programs. There was $2.5 billion to support R&D activities, and of that, $800 million was for biomass. And so I have a slide that talks about the details of that. And this $800 million was just announced last week, but the $480 I already mentioned for the solicitation that's currently active. And I'm sure some of you noticed there were these little, like, for those that can see my slides, there's a little yellow arrow next to our commercial scale biorefinery projects that said expanded through the recovery. And so what we're offering is that since the time that those projects were selected, construction costs have gone up, markets have sort of dried up for them to get their financing. So keeping with the same cost share requirements, which is 40% federal share and 60% private sector share, we're expanding the DOE ceiling to our legislative authority. We had capped it at 80 million, but we can go up to 100 million. So we're offering that to those commercial scale projects that might need it if they can still meet the 60-40 cost share requirement. Additionally, we have an area for fundamental research where we're expanding some of the sustainability work at our bioenergy research centers that are managed through our Office of Science. And we're also building a user facility that at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab that can take the results of some of the bioenergy research centers' work. It'll give priority to the bioenergy research centers, but any user could come in and use it to further develop the breakthroughs that come through those programs. We also had expanded our work in intermediate blends so that we can complete that work with the recovery funds. In addition to completing that work, we have an effort to optimize vehicle engines, to optimize them to operate on E85. So flexible fuel vehicles right now are optimized to operate on gasoline because that's the fuel that they use the most. So this would optimize them to operate on E85. And also, we're going to run a solicitation. There was a notice of intent that was issued last week. And the solicitation will look at expanding infrastructure for up to E85 at stations and also an education campaign for that, but specifically focused on ethanol and E85. And there was also $13.5 million to expand the pilot plant at the National Renewable Energy Lab, and it's a biochemical conversion pilot plant. Most of the money is focused on the pretreatment reactor, which happened to be the bottleneck of that facility. This upgrade will allow it to operate up to 1 dry ton per day. Our program, we've had an assistant secretary that's been nominated but not yet confirmed, and so we don't have a lot of new information about where the new administration is going, but we have heard the president's goals overall for the department, and they're in scientific discovery, clean, secure energy, economic prosperity, and climate change. And we feel that our program supports all 4 of those areas as it's currently structured, but there are certainly some adjustments that could be made that would support those as well. And so we're looking forward to hearing from the new administration about their priorities for our program in the future. Bill pretty much covered this slide, but this does list the 11 agencies that participate in the Biomass R&D Board. And this slide lists some of the actions across. There are 7 interagency working groups that have been reporting to that board over the past 18 months or so. And these are some of the activities that they had signed up to. And right now we have 6 reports that are undergoing interagency review that give a little bit more detail on coordination across the federal sector in areas of feedstock logistics, conversion. Some of the studies on on infrastructure are going to be coming out of that. And this is just a list of some of the things that were signed up to in the action plan, and just to let you know that more details will be forthcoming. We're hoping that we'll be able to get those through the approval process and released sometime in the fall. And then this is just a slide about the directive that Bill had mentioned last week. It was the The Secretary of Energy announced the recovery projects for biomass. The EPA Administrator announced the rulemaking for greenhouse gases against the renewable fuel standard. And the Secretary of Agriculture announced this new directive for an interagency working group. It looked like the group was going to be focusing on biofuels policy to a large measure, but again, we look forward to hearing more about that and supporting those activities. And I just thought that I'd also mention for people that are interested in providing us feedback on our program and on the way that we balance our activities and our priorities. We've been undergoing a peer review process focused at the different activities kind of across the supply chain is really how we focus our program. But that's all going to be brought together this summer in July on the 14th and 15th at an overall program review. And you're more than welcome to participate and attend if you're interested in that. And that is my last slide.
Are there any questions for Valerie or Bill? Yeah.
Valerie, the infrastructure, pulp and paper industry, under a certain amount of pressure, is one opportunity for conversion to ethanol. Does that fit in some of these prototype project areas, since it's kind of a conversion rather than a ground-up facility?
Yeah. In terms of the actual conversion processes, you mean? A couple of our projects that we have listed, the biorefinery projects, are looking at modifications to pulp mills that are currently not economical, and using that infrastructure to make modifications to produce fuels instead of paper or pulp. So, yeah. And I guess I would say, in terms of the feedstock logistics solicitation, the thought is probably that the infrastructure already exists for wood chips, but for something like a short rotation woody crop where probably different equipment would need to be built, that kind of thing would probably fit in.
You went through that board, the slide that had the board, biomass board, fairly quickly. Can you tell me what representation you have on there as far as with forestry or forest resources? Is there someone from Society of American Foresters or National Association of State Foresters?
The board actually, yeah, so I should probably have mentioned the committee as well as the board. The board is only federal government representation, so it's only federal governments. But USDA is represented by rural development and also by research, education, and economics. But I know that there have been members from the Forest Service that participate on the interagency working groups, and so as a result of that and some of their leadership roles in the interagency working groups have participated in board meetings and that kind of thing. But in addition to that, we have a technical advisory committee that is represented by, it's about 30. The legislation gives about 10 categories that have to be included within the board, within the committee's membership. And we have a very strong wood products supporter on the advisory committee from SUNY, the State University of New York. But I know that we have some others that support that as well. And we try to bring in different associations and rotate on and off memberships so that we get a breadth of different kinds of recommendations coming into the departments. And that group has been providing recommendations directly to the board. So a group of the board members will come at least once a year to the meeting and hear the recommendations from the committee.
I've got one for each of them. Okay? So I'll start with Valerie. In liquid fuels. Is there any discussion within the department at any times of creating incentives or focus on offsetting fuel oil and propane that are used for space heating, which are a draw and a demand for liquid fuels, and using biomass to substitute there and have a direct offset and reduce the demand?
Yeah, there's certainly discussion of that, and it's technology that we encourage. But some of the thinking is, for instance, like if you develop diesel that is the quality that can be used in engines for transportation, that it should be a high enough quality also for home heating and those kinds of applications, so that the transportation is kind of one of the worst case technologies that you develop. But our reason for focusing on transportation fuels is because of national security. So we're really trying to provide a domestic source of energy to offset one that's currently a foreign source of energy, whereas a lot of the home heating and the power are already domestic sources from coal or natural gas, and aren't so dependent on the foreign sources of oil. That's really the focus, what the focus is.
And that's why I was thinking specifically the fuel oil and propane are both derived from oil.
Yeah, I mean, that's a much smaller use of it than the transportation application. So that's why, from a national perspective, that's where we put our focus for that reason. But we encourage the use of biofuels for those applications as well.
Bill, on the Renewable Energy for America program, the developing a district heating system in a rural community would, I assume, fit underneath that program?
If the district would be considered a rural small business, which it probably should.
Right. So, and so what's likely is you might develop a rural district heating system. It might involve 10 small businesses and a number of residential kinds of things, but you may need to have a business that would provide a service to that. Would that be one application for support to that, or if there's 10 businesses involved, would there be 10 applications?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that. We have to look at how the umbrella business is organized and where it would meet the definition of small business. It's a possibility that it could just be one applicant for the umbrella business. And if it didn't meet the definition, then we'd probably have to look at each individual business as a separate application. Okay. But I understand your concept. You want to kind of have them go together, cooperatively work together, right? For efficiency purposes. Right. And that's what we try to encourage as much as possible. So we would want to look at the umbrella organization first as a possibility.
Any further questions? Well, thank you very much, Bill and Valerie, and I'll turn it back to you, Tom.